Hello, everyone. I am very happy to be here. I did just come right off a bus. Well, not just off a bus. Some of you may be wondering why I have this very fetching pin on my chest. I'll tell you later. Stay tuned. But I have just returned from the Internet 2012 campaign bus tour. Now, what on earth am I doing on a bus tour? Well, it has something to do with Superman, which also has something to do with my talk. Magic slides? Oh, that normally works. All right, well, hear me out. The reason I want to talk to you all today is because I want to talk about why startups will and must save the USA. Imagine a striking Superman up on the screen to the side. Wait, is this my fault? I've got really good cat photos too. Ah, huzzah, it was my fault. All right, sorry. Okay, there's the Superman, as promised, also known as Clark Kent. How did Lois not notice? I mean, really, just glasses. Anyway, you can tweet at me, Alexis Ohanian, afterward or during this talk. I want to keep this conversation going. But I'm really excited because normally I'm a startup guy. Ever since I graduated from college, I have been doing tech startups. You heard about Reddit, which is probably the most well-known. It's now one of the 50 most popular websites on the internet. Hopefully none of you use it because you're too busy running your companies. It's a really good time waster. All right, sounds like a few Redditors in the audience. I've also been working on Breadpig, which you heard about. That is a pig with bread wings, as well as Hipmunk, a travel search alternative to everything else you've been wasting your time on. You'll notice they all have cute mascots. That's only because I really like drawing cute mascots. Not a requirement for startup success, just something I really like doing. I'm a startup guy, like I said. I had some really inspirational parents who encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to. That was their mistake. But what turned out to be a startup entrepreneurial kind of lifestyle changed very quickly. And actually, CEA had a lot to do with that. Cats, currency of the internet, got me into politics, of all things. Because Michael was down in DC to help defeat a couple of bills that you heard about earlier, SOPA and PIPA. And thankfully, for the internet, CEA stood up and said no. And thankfully for me, I happened to be in Washington one of those days when Michael was in town, and he said, hey, listen, I'm taking a group of people, entrepreneurs, just like you, all around to meet with senators and representatives. Would you mind just telling them your story? You'll have a few minutes, give it your best. And I did. I told them how my friend and I had graduated from college, moved up to Medford, Massachusetts, started a company with $12,000, and a year and a half later, we were acquired by Condé Nast. We'd lived the American dream in the span of 16 months, thanks to an open internet. And if either one of those bills had been law, that dream could not have happened. And it wouldn't have just been for us, it would have been from other Americans in districts all over this country. And it made me more interested in politics than I've ever been. And fortunately, it didn't make me cynical. Fortunately, it actually made me really optimistic. And I want to tell you why. Most recently, we did this. 8 days, one bus. We wanted to make sure that the narrative was no longer going to be this. There's a little refresher on SOPA and PIPA. It makes for a good headline, Hollywood versus Silicon Valley. But the reality is, the kind of innovation that's helping this country get its swagger back is happening all over the United States. I know I was there in New York with 2,500 other people from the tech community protesting in front of our senators' offices. Surely this isn't just Silicon Valley. Now, we know about the money that was involved. Just a quick refresher. You can see CEA down there, which is not much compared to, I've run out of space. Hold on, there we go. To how much the entertainment industry plowed into Washington in order to get a couple of bills passed. And fortunately, despite a bunch of politicians who thought, yay, bipartisan bill, we can get this done by New Year's, the internet and organizations like CEA said no. They said, challenge accepted. We're going to see what we can do. We can see if we can actually win without that kind of an advantage, without all those monies in Washington. And so there we were. That's actually me with Representative Chaffetz on the aforementioned trip that Michael and CEA coordinated. That happened to be one of the best meetings of the day, in my opinion. Representative Chaffetz seemed really, really interested in hearing our stories and understood that, if we were going to be performing surgery on the internet, we should have a few doctors in the room. That was actually a metaphor he used during the House Judiciary Committee meeting One of the few times I've sat through 2 hours worth of C-SPAN was to hear him say this: we need some nerds. Now, I wish he had just said experts, but that's fine. If it were any other industry, we would have been called experts, but that's okay. I'll take it. And the good news was we got invited. We got invited down to the house. I was terrified. I was supposed to be on vacation, actually, with my girlfriend, who still hasn't totally forgiven me, and rightly so, when I was notified that I'd have to go down to the house to testify, something I have never done and was terrified about doing. It turned out, though, I didn't have to go down there, because on January 18th, SOPA had already been so thwarted that they didn't need us to come down, but PIPA was still there. PIPA was still relevant. And on the 18th, the internet, including CEA, organized a blackout. Reddit, I'm very proud to say, was one of the first to stand up and say, we need to do something about this. And I journeyed outside in a suit and tie and spoke a bit in front of our senator's offices there in New York. Fortunately, it was a beautiful day in January. It could have been much colder. But we had a couple thousand people show up. We had senators and representatives changing sides literally overnight, 5 of whom were co-sponsors, because a bunch of Americans said no. A bunch of Americans said, these bills shall not pass. Right? Americans did that. Yes, clap it up for Americans, right? This was a triumph of American people over lobbying dollars, and the American people actually won, right? That's not supposed to happen. Everyone in DC now has told me that was unprecedented. Now people are worried about getting SOPA'd. Now people are starting to reconsider what bills they want to try to pass when they affect something as powerful as the internet. But we weren't done, because that was a great day, but that was just a start. Because I don't want this innovation to go away. I don't want this incredible platform to be thwarted. I want everyone to know that you can't mess with the internet. It turns out we crowdfunded for this on the internet. This is a billboard that was for a month directly outside the window of Representative Lamar Smith's offices back home in Texas. We might be trolling a little here, but this, we wanted to make it very, very clear. Don't mess with it. And the reason why this is so powerful actually reminds me of a Thomas Friedman book, which I want to be clear, the world is not flat. We've looked into this. NASA's confirmed it. It's not flat. But the World Wide Web is. And that's a really, really awesome idea, right? That's what drives entrepreneurs like me to start these companies. That's what drives investors like me to invest in entrepreneurs who start these companies. Because if you have a level playing field like you do, where all links are created equal, the best ideas can actually win. The best ideas can grow, and in a matter of years, start to disrupt and dramatically change industries. And they do so through innovation. I love hearing that word so often. My catchphrase during those months of SOPA PIPA was innovation, not legislation. Innovation, not legislation. And it seemed to work. It turns out, lo and behold, most Americans actually agree that that's probably a better way to arrive at a solution. And it's our job to make sure that playing field is as level as possible, and as many of us can get access to it as we can. So I ended up getting a little, probably too involved in this political stuff. That's all photoshopped, let me just be clear. You can't see it, but in the background there's a little My Little Pony hanging out there. They've managed to combine so many internet memes. Bonus points if you can spot the bacon on my tie. That is in fact a bacon tie. Yeah, that's slightly photoshopped. The point is, I got to thinking about this more and more. More and more of us were thinking, how do we stop this from ever happening again? We can't just be on the defensive when these bad bills come about. We need to make sure every one of our elected officials knows that internet freedom is something that is important to all of their constituents. So it dawned on me, what about a bus? Yes, we could campaign. We could do an Internet 2012 campaign bus tour. Now this is important. I show you the Straight Talk Express because we actually did get the Straight Talk Express, just with a different wrap for the purposes of our bus tour. But it didn't get interesting until I shared this idea with a friend of mine, Eric Martin. He is the general manager of Reddit. That is one of my favorite photos of him ever. And I said, why don't we do a bus tour? And he was like, that's ridiculous, but I love the idea. And then he took a look at the debate schedule and realized that the first presidential debate was in Denver, Colorado, just a couple weeks ago. And the only vice presidential debate was going to be in Danville, Kentucky. And if you drew a line from Denver to Danville, holy cow, you're crisscrossing the heartland of America. You're all of a sudden talking about a ton of Americans that were never brought up, that were never mentioned as an example of a bunch of people who really want this open internet. In that Silicon Valley versus Hollywood metaphor, you're missing out on a ton of awesome entrepreneurs. So let's get a bus. Of course, we crowdfunded it. Thanks to Indiegogo, we did interesting pricing models, like if you gave a certain amount, we would drunk dial you. If you gave another amount, we'd put your photo up inside the bus. We're from the internet. We couldn't help ourselves. My favorite moment on the trip was watching Craig Newmark, the founder of Craigslist, get drunk dialed for campaigning. He was very, he had forgotten, actually. I don't think he even knew that that was part of the donation amount. But anyway, that is the Straight Talk Express with our fresh wrap on it. And we took this bus, which ironically didn't have Wi-Fi. They had forgotten to install the Wi-Fi on the internet bus. Can you imagine them going through that checklist? We're like, all right, we got the bus, which was the Internet 2012 bus, right? We got the wrap on it, good, check. We got the bottled water, check. Are we forgetting anything on the internet bus? Have they asked for anything else on the internet bus? No. So we didn't have any internet, but thankfully we had enough technology to sort of hack it along the way. But we went around the country, and I just got back. This is the first time I'm telling all these stories in a public forum. We just got back because we were met with so many people all across the country who saw this opportunity. And this is that opportunity of the startup that is so phenomenal, right? For the amount of money that it costs to buy a new Ford Focus, you can invest it in a couple of entrepreneurs. You can invest it in a couple of entrepreneurs, and a few years later, they can turn that into $1 billion company. And that's not a hypothetical, that's a fact. Dropbox went through Y Combinator a couple of years after I did. So I remember seeing them show up and talk about how they wanted to change the whole idea of syncing files, make it really easy. And that company actually started on a bus. It started at South Station in Boston while the founder, Drew Houston, was working on another project but didn't have his flash drive. And frustrated, he thought, let me just solve this problem. Let me build something to just seamlessly sync files. He started this thing on a Chinatown bus, okay? And today, it is $1 billion company that employs hundreds of people and is making so many of our lives so much better. These efficiencies, this wonder can happen anywhere. And the two guys who started Reddit, that's me and that's my co-founder, Steve Huffman, we had no idea what we were doing. No clue, and I can assure you, I've invested in about 50 startups since. I've advised and mentored hundreds more through Y Combinator. And for all the entrepreneurs in the room, you guys know, I mean, for all the books we try to read, for all the conferences we try to go to, I mean, some of those talks are very informative, but we just hack it, right? We just have to find a way. That's the entrepreneurial spirit. It's just figuring out as you go along. And that recipe, level playing field, the ability to get in somewhere with a good idea, no experience, but a willingness and a desire to hustle it and just hack it is powerful, right? Because Reddit, that started with a bunch of stickers. That was how we promoted the site. We didn't have any big Super Bowl campaign. We just had a bunch of stickers. And these stickers went with me wherever I went. And I don't know how legal that is, but you didn't hear it from me. And eventually, we actually started getting people sending photos of our mascot that they made. This was incredible. This was like fan art. Holy cow. We sued them. You can be sure we sued every one of them. This little girl, she did such a, we sued her. I'm just kidding. What industry would do that? No. No, we honor, No. We're so grateful that they would be so excited about this and sharing these photos. And I mean, this was to celebrate the launch of Portal 2, which is all kinds of weird cross-branding stuff. But what was insane was it eventually got to this. And that's a real tattoo. That's not the last one I've seen either. This is a gentleman named Fernando Takai. He lives in Brazil. And we obviously didn't even try to sue him. No, I'm just grateful and hopeful that he never regrets this, that we got to a point with an advertising budget of $500. That's the entire amount of money we've spent on ads with Reddit, to the point where someone would feel comfortable enough tattooing our mascot on their body, right? And this is not a testament to Reddit. This is a testament to the internet and how this platform can scale ideas in such a compelling way. So this is where Reddit is today. This is where Reddit is at today, and there are thousands of communities around all kinds of different subjects that our users all create and share links around. But what I can't come back to enough is that it was started by us, all right? That's Steve, and that's me in an awful papier-mâché Reddit alien costume, all right? We had no business doing this. We didn't have MBAs. We didn't have any gatekeeper that was like, okay, it's time for you to begin this company. No, we just did it. And this is the message that I can bring to entrepreneurs and college students and just people anywhere in this country, right? The idea that if you've got an idea, you can just start doing it, you can win. And this is something that Y Combinator, which invested in us, has pretty much sort of set the stage for. And this model has been replicated not just all over this country, but all over this world. And it's an awesome idea. And as this marketplace gets more efficient, Things like angel lists start bubbling up, and now these companies, these startups, can start getting funding in a more efficient way because they've got a profile for their company, and there are profiles for prospective investors. And all of a sudden, supply starts meeting demand, and magical things start happening. And that's just an efficiency that's brought about because the internet, this technology, has connected supply and demand. This is old school business. This is business 101, right? Supply meets demand, but it's so beautiful when it works. And it happens all over this country, not just in Silicon Valley. So we actually got a random person donated their time to make this beautiful logo, which you see on my pin. Of course, because we needed stickers. But the other reason was because we needed something to take on this bus, where we had a half dozen journalists going all over with us. That is the back of the Straight Talk Express, in case you were curious. We couldn't find any lingering McCain stuff. I was really hoping to pull open a seat cushion and find some cool historical stuff, but no, there's nothing in there. First company we visited is producing these things called cubelets. They're a company called Modular Robotics. All right, they're Legos. If you started making Lego in the 21st century, not somewhere in the Netherlands, but right here in America, in Colorado. And what's so awesome about these things is they're teaching robotics to 10-year-olds. These cubes stick together and automatically start moving. They have different motors on them, different widgets on them. They're all also made in America. We saw the entire facility. We saw it from start to finish. And they get processed using a 3D printer. They get prototyped rather with a 3D printer. They get assembled there in shop. They get sold right here. And this company's only been around for a little bit. Modular Robotics, check it out. But they are already doing brisk business all over the world. In fact, they were recently dealing with the fact that a bunch of Austrians have now been demanding these products. First, I just love the idea of a bunch of Austrians being like, ja, we want your Cubelets. As many cubelets as you can send to Österreich, please. And I asked them, I speak German, that's why my fake German accent's so good. And I asked them, well, how did they hear about you in Austria? What started this Austrian hunger of the last couple of months? Like, how much was the campaign? What'd you end up doing? They were like, no. People just talked about it. People took photos of their kids playing with these things, and they love them. And what we hear time and time again are customers thanking us for making such a high-quality product. And part of the reason they can make such a high-quality product is because their facilities are right next door. And part of the reason this is great for them is because their turnaround time is as long as it takes to walk on over to the factory and walk back. This is innovation happening in Boulder, Colorado, all right? And this is the kind of thing that just started off our tour. We saw this company called Simple Energy. We hosted an event with over 150 members from the Boulder startup community who came out and wanted to talk about how they could get their politicians to be more aware of how different their companies were than businesses in the traditional sense. Because the beauty of the startup, the hope of the startup, is this idea that you can take a small amount of money and over the span of just a few years, thanks to software, grow it to something huge, grow it into something that employs hundreds of people, grow it into something that starts to build an entire ecosystem and an entire community. And we got people to sign this Declaration of Internet Freedom, which I encourage you all to read, and if you like it, sign on. We've got a number of representatives and senators and plenty of people otherwise who have signed on board to these very simple principles, these ideas that make an open internet work and that we found folks on the left and the right can all agree on. And in case you didn't notice, that bus is literally half red and half blue because we know this is such a bipartisan issue. And in fact, we wanted to test this. I asked literally every person we met what they thought about this. And it wasn't hard because when you drive into a trucker rest stop with a giant bus that says Internet 2012, people ask, what is this all about? And so I pitched this trucker randomly because he asked. He was like, what's the bus about? And I was like, oh, we're going around the country trying to make sure that every politician knows that all of their constituents demand internet freedom. And he was like, yeah, rock on, man. Dude, I want to leave my truck and join you guys on the bus tour. And I thought about it for a second. I thought, man, that would be such an awesome convoy if we could get the semi along with the bus. But these principles of internet freedom, these principles of permissionless innovation, these are so saleable to every American we met. They didn't have to be entrepreneurs. They could have been high school football coaches. There's a startup called Huddle in Nebraska that's building software that's being used by high school coaches to share their game footage. Now, I'm a huge football fan, and I played 1 year of high school football. I was on the team. I was on the bench for 1 year of high school football. But I could imagine what it would be like to be a starter and get feedback from my coach, not just like a week later in the big tape room, but like emailed to me with actual arrows on the screen as if my coach were John Madden all of a sudden. This is the software that they're building right now in Nebraska that not only employs, I think, 75 people downtown, but also saves countless hours for these high school coaches. It actually makes the parents of high school players' lives better because when it comes time for this kid to put together all the footage for his highlight tape to send to college so maybe he can get a scholarship, it's already been done. Software is making their lives so much better. It's saving so many hours, and we heard from the founders, it's actually saving a number of marriages because coaches who would normally be spending all of their time editing tape and ignoring their spouses now have more time with their families, right? This is an incredible win happening in Nebraska, and this technology is literally being used right now by the Jets, the New York Jets, all right? Why can't this innovation come out of Nebraska? It can, and it is. So we took our bus to the Rake School at the University of Nebraska, where they're actually teaching students a mix of both business acumen and savvy as well as programming, where they're getting students building companies in the curriculum. And we had 250 students come out to want to talk to us about why this was important. In fact, I showed off this great app called Contact Congress. It's a free iPhone app. I encourage you all to download it. It's beautiful. Based on where you are, just pulls up your 2 senators and the representative from whatever district you're in at that moment. And with the push of a button, you can call their offices, right? And so I told these 250 students, listen, you guys are entering the world now, right? I mean, college was awesome, but you guys have to know that you've got some employees, all right? You've got 2 senators and 1 representative, and those are your employees, and they work for you. They work for us. So you need to feel comfortable having your employees on speed dial, because if there's something you don't like, you call them up. You put on your boss pose, and you push that button, and you call them up, and you realize it's just a conversation. It's a human conversation that any one of you can have. And so we actually called their representative, who did not support SOPA. We had to check that first. I was like, quick, we check this? And so we had to leave a voicemail, though, because it was 5 p.m. Actually, it was 4:59, and he was out of the office. I guess it was a slow day. But the point was, 250 university students, all now excited and connected and curious about all this potential, and realizing that now, hold on, they have a voice. They actually have a little thing, an app, right next to Angry Birds, called like Angry Constituents, where you can just push a button and call up your senator and rep, and why not, right? That's why SOPA and PIPA ultimately were defeated, was because a bunch of the voters realized that we had power. So we had an uncaucus hosted by Dwala in Des Moines. Now, Dwala is a company that is trying to reinvent money online. And they very famously took a bunch of money from some big-time New York venture capitalists, including Union Square Ventures, probably the dominant East Coast VC firm. And very famously, they told them, thank you so much for the money. We're going to go back to Des Moines. Now, that was interesting, right? Because these VCs said, well, I mean, New York's a great place to do a company. Got all this banking industry. Like, why don't you want to do it here? And they said, no, we've got employees there. We have a community there. We've got all kinds of talent we can pull from the universities. We want to reinvest back in Iowa. And we can take this money because it's going to go a lot further than it would in New York. And that hurt me a little bit, but it's true because I live in Brooklyn. But the fact of the matter was, a great startup is now being built, and a great ecosystem is now being built around that in Des Moines. And why the hell not, right? So one of the folks who came out to this uncaucus is Carl. Now, Carl's a pig farmer, and he got up on the stage and explained how crowdfunding is going to change his business. He has some awesome ideas for how he can make his hog farm more efficient, but there's no investors for him. So he's going to rely on crowdfunding. He called out Kickstarter, Indiegogo, the Jobs Act, all the potential that is now going to come from other people's innovation. His thinking was, I know hog farming better than everyone else, right? I'm going to focus on that. And I'm going to count on the fact that there's going to be some plucky innovator, probably down the street in Des Moines, who's working on the technical solution to make my job easier. And I'm going to take advantage of it. And so if we weren't hearing from entrepreneurs actually building this stuff, we were hearing from Americans who were taking advantage of it. So I talked to you about Dwala. And so I love how they have driven so much excitement and so much attention in this area. And you can read things like Silicon Prairie, which is a wonderful TechCrunch alternative in case you're interested in companies that are like actually making really cool stuff that is making money and changing industries. It's exciting. And it's an exciting time not just if you're living in Brooklyn and not just if you're living in Silicon Valley. We got a friend of ours, Ben Ha, who is an excellent warrior in the fight against SOPA and PIPA. He runs a fabulous company called Cheeseburger, which you probably know from all of those cute cat photos that you either send or receive from a couple of your friends. I'm the friend who always sends them, just so you know. But he's building a business there in Seattle, and he has been a staunch supporter of some more realistic laws that actually go to support innovation instead of stifle it. So he came on, joined the tour for a weekend, and did some radio stuff while we hosted other events. We went all the way to the Kauffman Foundation. We saw entrepreneurship in grandest scale I've seen in a long time. This was an entire building dedicated to championing entrepreneurship and promoting it. And we had a few hundred people show up for a great panel where we had entrepreneurs both locally, but also folks that we brought with us, including from a startup called Ag Local that I'm going to talk to a little later, as well as another one called Local Motors. Now, I told you guys that we had a little bit of a convoy. I didn't say what the other part of the convoy was. It's this. It's called the Rally Fighter. Now, this is a really awesome looking car. I think we can all agree on that. This car is even more awesome when you consider that we had kind of a Smokey and the Bandit thing going on when it was driving around with the bus. Okay, all right, that's pretty nifty, but it gets even cooler. This car was crowdsourced and designed on the internet. This car went from a bunch of ideas that people all over the world were contributing to a real car that they are selling and manufacturing entirely in the United States thanks to an open internet. So what Local Motors is doing is saying, okay, making a car, that seems pretty ambitious. We got this. We're going to use the internet as a way to crowdsource all the best ideas from legit designers and engineers and build a real car which we sell. This car is the product of a bunch of random people who've never met each other contributing designs on the internet. Now, this is one thing if it's Threadless, which is an extremely popular t-shirt company based out of Chicago. All right, t-shirts, they don't seem too complicated. That seems like a reasonable thing. In just a couple of years, this company is doing it with cars. They are crowdsourcing cars, and they're doing it at a fraction of the cost that traditional car manufacturers are, and they're doing it entirely here. How cool is that? We expected to hear a lot about software that was going to be making things a lot easier, software that was going to be connecting supply and demand. We didn't expect software that we'd be able to drive around in, right? And that's what this software is producing. And these founders are extremely grateful for the fact that this innovation can and continue to happen. And so we took this car in our convoy to the Parker farm. This was small, Richmond. It wasn't technically in Richmond, Missouri. It was a little further out, really off the beaten path. And I had the best breakfast of my life because Tom and his family had prepared it with eggs that had just been laid and some sausage that was made just a few days earlier from pigs on the farm. What is so awesome about this farm is it's powered by Ag Local. Now, here's another company. This was started in Nebraska. No, sorry, Kansas City. This company was started in Kansas City, and it wants to change the relationship between farmers and the people who buy their meat. They are the startup powering the meat lover. All right, and so this farmer, Tom, this is actually Nathan, the co-founder. Tom, not pictured here, but you can imagine him here to the left of those wonderful cows. He checks his email thrice a week, and yet this software is changing his business. He's not a techie guy. Doesn't have a BlackBerry, he's checking every few seconds. He is running his farm the best way he can because he knows how to do that really well. But this software is changing his life because it is connecting him better to the people buying their meat, whether it's someone at a restaurant or whether it's an individual. Now the marketplace is more efficient for what he is selling. And now when he's forecasting what grain he's going to order for his next round of cows, he can do that based on great data. And people are building this software, and they're doing it in Kansas City, and there are farmers down the road in Missouri who are using it, right? Every industry is being affected by this. There are startups for everything. And one of my favorite stories involves these two ladies who met each other on the internet through a website called Etsy, proudly made in Brooklyn, New York. Now, Etsy is a fantastic marketplace for people to take their homemade crafts and sell it to the world. Now, this was interesting a few years ago, but now it's gotten super interesting because they met each other online because they both had really great Etsy stores. They liked each other's work, and lo and behold, they both lived in St. Louis. So they said, why don't we go and start a store? So now they've taken their online retail success from Etsy and have actually now started a brick and mortar store in downtown St. Louis. They're flipping the script on it, right? So many other companies have taken their brick and mortar models and tried to adapt it online. Here are two entrepreneurs who met on the internet who are now starting a brick and mortar business together. About 50% of their sales still come from Etsy, but the other 50 is part of what's rejuvenating downtown St. Louis. We saw this store not very far from where a massive building, sort of affectionately nicknamed T-Rex, has been modified. It used to be the headquarters of the May company, which I guess was acquired by Macy's, and then they vacated the building. This building is now being retrofitted as an incubator space, is now being retrofitted as an office space for all these startups, and it's revitalizing St. Louis. Also, fun fact, apparently after the acquisition of Anheuser-Busch, a bunch of very serious beer drinkers decided that they were going to make it their jobs to start up microbrews that were actually still brewed in the States. And so about a half dozen of new microbrews have sprung up in the last couple of years that are now fueling all these wonderful startups. So it's a wonderful symbiotic relationship. You work hard at your startup, and then you go drink a bunch of microbrew St. Louis beer. This is happening all over the country. And the core of this story is a really simple graph, right? This is the Econ 101 graph, but it's so beautiful, right? Because when business works, supply meets demand. Consumers get what they want, and businesses get paid for it. And all the internet is doing is making that graph line up a lot more efficiently than it ever could. Mark Andreessen, a rather successful founder and VC, very famously wrote this great Wall Street Journal op-ed talking about how software was eating the world. And so much of it is happening thanks to and is fueled by this internet technology, which connects all of us more and more every day and speeds everything up more and more every day, that it's presenting all kinds of opportunities for these small companies to now grow. Because yes, the startup industry is extremely volatile. Yes, many of these companies are going to fail. That's just statistics. Most businesses that get started are going to fail. But what's incredible about this is the ecosystem that it builds. Because trust me, you don't find many startup founders or developers looking for work for very long. And this is something I'm going to get to a little bit later. Everywhere we went, we heard the same thing. We're hiring. Every single where we went. It's not just in San Francisco, and it's not just in New York. Everyone is hiring. There are not many parts of the US economy right now where you can say that, right? As we continue to find our swagger as a country, I look at the tech sector as being one of the few parts that's still trying to hire, that's still trying to grow. And that's why I get so excited about these things. That's why I get so excited about the fact that startups, for everything they have going against them, have a few things going for them that make the milkshake drinking possible. Let me talk to you about specifically what I mean by that. One of the things that we've found exploited time and time again by these upstart companies is this notion that your user experience, the thing that you're doing for me, either shows me how much you respect me, which can be a good thing. We all want to feel respected. I feel respected in that photo. Or how much you disrespect me. And one of the examples I like to give is a very basic one. Presumably, you guys have all booked a flight online before. It's interesting, side note, my father has been a travel agent for the last 36 years. And I remember at the dinner table, he would come home during the dot-com bubble, and he would be so livid. He was so upset because all the online travel agencies were drinking his milkshake, right? It was changing his business forever. He actually once sent, he doesn't love that I tell this story, but they used to give commissions to travel agents, the airlines did. And one day they finally cut those commissions to zero. And he sent a fax to the first airline that did that, and they all followed suit. But he sent a fax to that first airline that said 2 words. It said, "Fuck you." And, and he told me this story, and I remember being in high school thinking, man, this internet sounds incredible. Like, I was using it to build websites for my favorite video game, Quake 2. But I thought, man, there's something really cool here. I need to learn more about this, and I want to be on the right side of the disruption. But to my dad's credit, and to the credit of so many entrepreneurs and innovators, he didn't go call up a lobbyist or a lawyer and say, hey, hold on, listen, consumer preferences are changing, so we're going to need to pass some really bad bills like SOPA and PIPA to make sure that they are adapting. No, he innovated, and thankfully, much respect to my dad, one of my greatest role models, he's still in business today. Small little travel agency out there in Western Maryland. Because he did what nearly all of us as Americans do. He just found a way to innovate, to adapt his business. So back to the search results. When I see something like this, I think, hold on, something's not right here. This is page 20 of a flight search, all right? That means, presumably, someone wants to actually go through 20 pages of results to get this, which is the worst flight imaginable. Like, can you imagine, just from like a designer perspective or a UX, like, who on earth is thinking, oh, finally, I got to page 20. Honey, found it, worst flight, most expensive, you're gonna hate this, we're gonna hate each other afterward, it's gonna be a terrible honeymoon, right? Like what engineering decision, what design decision is like, yes, there's some masochist out there who needs this, right? It's infuriating. There's no point to this. Why would you do this? And then it gets even better. It gets even better, because if you look closely, at the bottom it says, too many pages? Use the filters to instantly narrow down the list. So it's as though they have the technology that they're just taunting you with, but they won't use it to save you the agony of looking through 20 pages of search results. Like, what's the point of that even being there? And so that was the nugget that started Hitmonk, which was a site that I helped Steve and Adam launch a couple of years ago. We just wanted to make travel search really simple because we knew that agony was more important than price. right? There are clearly some frequent travelers here, right? Most people are willing to pay a few extra dollars to avoid a layover. And we knew that because we had traveled before. We've been stuck at O'Hare at that layover that we would have gladly paid $20 to escape. So why don't we just build that into the product? We built our product by solving the specific problem and starting there. And that's a story that is not unique to us. That is the story that so many of these companies are doing. And the good news is, it's going to mean better stuff for everyone. And when people find better stuff, they're going to talk about it. We always know word of mouth is extremely important. Word of mouth for the win, just in case some of you don't spend as much time on the internet as I do. Whether I'm talking to Fortune 500 CEOs or the CEOs of tiny little startups, this is the thing, right? Everyone wanted to know, what is social media going to change? Oh my God, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, do I have to make an account? What's going to happen? LinkedIn, what's Pinterest? Whatever, it doesn't matter. The technology is going to keep changing. The reality is, this water cooler, this thing that has determined the fate of your businesses since time immemorial. I guess there was a time before water coolers. The point is, the conversations that were always had around water coolers or dinner tables or bowling teams, those are the conversations that really ultimately drove so many consumer decisions, right? Word of mouth is powerful. That's why it's cliche. And all this technology is doing, all this connected web is doing, is making these ideas spread further and faster than ever before. So good news. If you're making some awesome stuff, those same water cooler conversations are going to spread further and faster than ever before. Now, bad news, if you're not doing awesome stuff, those conversations are also going to spread further and faster than ever before. But the good news is, you now have this incredible platform for great user experiences. People have no choice but to build companies around this idea of giving a damn, like lots of them. They must give lots of damns. This is the kind of thing that I can only best illustrate with an example of really just how low the bar has been set. Now this is obviously not how you hurdle. I am not an expert hurdler, but that is not how you do it. The bar has been set really low, and let me explain. Tony Hsieh, you've probably all heard of him, authored this great book, Delivering Happiness, based on his experience of being the CEO of Zappos, now acquired by Amazon. And the general thesis of this book is treat customers well, right? It's customer experience is what matters most. That's what matters at Zappos, and that's why they're winning. This book is an international bestseller. He goes all over the world spreading this message of treat customers well. What does that say about the state of business when a revolutionary idea is treat customers well, right? Like CEOs everywhere are just going, oh, Johnson, I knew it. Oh, after decades of treating our customers like crap, they finally opened my eyes to this, right? Like, this is, it's just, it's frustrating, but it's a tremendous opportunity because that's the status quo. Actually, it's worse. It's worse than that, actually. It's got to bring Riker into this. It really is. But it's a great opportunity because, like I said, the bar has been set really low. And those good experiences that consumers have now spread further and faster than ever before. And these little ideas, the startup, those little ideas can grow further and faster than ever before. One of the big things we found hearing from startup communities all over from Denver to Danville was that their politicians didn't quite understand the difference between a business and a startup. Because at the end of the day, businesses, whether it's a local pizza place or what have you, are extremely important to a local economy, no doubt. But a startup is a little different. A startup needs different things than a business does because no matter how well that pizza place is doing, it's always going to be limited by how fast it can grow based on the fact that it still deals with things in meat space, right? It still has to hire new people that require new training with new ovens and more dough. Like, we're still limited by things in the tangible world. The more and more of your business that is reliant on code, of course, the more and more it can scale. And so that means tremendous opportunity for growth. That means a tremendous opportunity to hire. It means a tremendous opportunity to pour more money back into local ecosystems. And for the time being, politicians still don't quite get the differences of what a technology startup might need versus a more traditional business. Now, like I said, the traditional businesses are still vital to their economies. But yet, there's something else that startup needs. There's also something that those two women need that's a little different from their competitors that aren't quite grasping how important Etsy is to their business. And these politicians need to be aware of that. But what's cool is that everywhere we went, like I said, the phrase we could not hear enough of, the phrase we heard all the time was we are hiring. All the time. Everyone was like, hey, by the way, if you meet anyone who's looking for a developer job, we're hiring. Everyone is asking. Right now, that is an awesome thing. What's unfortunate about it is there are not enough people to hire. Now, I know there's some good folks who are working really hard to make sure that if you've got a PhD, a high technical degree, you get a path towards that visa. You get a path towards being at one of these companies. But more importantly, we need to get as many Americans coding as possible, which is why I just can't do enough to tell people that if you have any interest in technology, please, you can go online. Everyone started on Google, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or my co-founder Steve Huffman. They're all primarily self-taught. And these opportunities abound because remember, the internet was made by nerds. And so along the way, we left little tutorials to help others follow in our footsteps because we're all sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. What happened with Reddit, what's happening with Hitmonk, what's happening with all these success stories could not have happened without people before us, whether it was because of open source software or simply the fact that we're now more connected than ever. And the fact that Ag Local works is in large part due to the fact that so many restaurants are now familiar and actively online so that they're comfortable ordering their next shipment of delicious beef from a browser. But this is all a timing thing, and the timing has now been escalating. It's been going so quickly. And Soap and Pippa was almost going to derail all of that. And what's so frustrating, especially talking to a room full of innovators, is not just the stuff that would be squashed right now by bad legislation, but all the stuff we would never get to enjoy. All the stuff that we can't even dream of because by its definition, it's innovation. No one's ever seen it before. I wish I had a crystal ball, but maybe if I did, that would depress me because of all the stuff that we may not get. I wish I knew what was coming, but I don't. At the end of the day, I just know that we need to have the best, most level playing field possible for people to get on it and build it. And so one of the things that came out of this tour, and one of the things that I'd love to do with CEA, we'll talk about this, Michael, is the idea of a geek day. All right, now hear me out. Hear me out. We get a bunch of things. You can use the internet to crowdsource them. Some very specific asks to ask of our politicians. We find a day, somewhere next year, we flash mob Washington with appointments and get very reasonable, well-dressed people from every district in America to schedule an appointment with their representatives and their senators. And we all sit down and we do what CEA did with me and a bunch of other entrepreneurs and actually say to their staffs, here's what we're doing. We are trying to build our businesses in this digital age, and we could use a few things that would help us, and we could also make sure that you don't do a few things to crush us. And it's this kind of engagement that I hope becomes a more proactive way for us to make sure that these startups, this technology, this innovation is what drives this economy moving forward. Because when I think of all the great stuff, when I think of all the great people who have not been able to share their awesome ideas, who have not been able to build their awesome businesses, who have been somehow kept out by some gatekeeper or some nonsense or someone who said no or some MBA they didn't get or what have you. And I think of all the potential for talent on this platform, whether it's a robotics company in Boulder that's making 21st century Legos, or whether it's a hog farmer in Des Moines who just wants a way to fund his revolutionary ideas for doing more sustainable agriculture. Like, I want to see those come to fruition because I want better ribs, right? At the end of the day, that's all I want. And whether I'm an innovator or an investor or just a consumer, I want to make sure these things come to fruition. And I hope you all do too. And like I said, everything that has happened to me in my political life, has happened because CEA said, hey, do you want to come down to Washington and hang out with a few senators and representatives, which normally is not a very compelling pitch, right? No offense to senators and reps, but like there's probably some other more fun things to do. But I knew that it was something that I had to do because I wouldn't have been so fortunate to have had the success that I had if it weren't for an open internet. So thank you very much for having me, and I'd love to take questions. Yeah, sure. Okay, a couple questions.
About 5 minutes. Does anyone has a question or comment? Question or comment? Oh, I see you right back there. I can't see you very well, but you're getting a microphone. And then if we could have a microphone at the front for the second question for Gary Yakubian.
There's been a lot of controversy over Microsoft's decision to make their new Explorer version with the do not track option as a default on, and there's been a movement, I think, among a lot of internet companies and media companies to ask them to reverse that. I'm curious as to your point of view on that.
Wow, I feel really bad for not knowing about this. Okay, so this is the newest version of Internet Explorer?
Yes.
Wow, I forgot a lot of, very significant, a non-trivial number of people use Internet Explorer. Okay, wait, so sorry.
So Microsoft is making this push saying, hey, we respect consumers' privacy, so we're going to make this a default that the do not track is automatically on. And there's been a big movement among media and internet companies saying, hey, that's the way that we make the internet work, is by tracking information and being able to provide the free flow of information. And so there's been kind of a controversy. I was just curious about it.
That's really interesting. Okay, I've clearly not been involved in that debate.
Hey, if you want to be a congressman, you have to answer these questions.
I honestly don't know enough about that. That's just it. I don't want to be a congressman. Not at all. I want to be a startup founder again. Okay, that's interesting because, like, for instance, we use something called retargeting with Hipmunk advertising. We have advertising companies that work with us to make sure that if you visited Hipmunk once, we can find a way to present you with a relevant Hipmunk ad when you're on some other site. That helps us because, you know, we're not necessarily something you would use all the time. We're something you use when you need us, and so it helps to be able to retarget. Oh, geez. I don't know.
We can go to the next question.
No, can you email me? Let me actually read about this.
It's okay. It's okay.
No, I feel bad. I really don't know. I mean, a part of me thinks that at the end of the day, consumers should have the choice of what they want. And I don't want to presume what a majority of consumers want. I don't know, because I know there are plenty of instances where, if I think of myself anecdotally, I'd be perfect. Like I'm looking for this because it makes my browsing life easier. Because I can remember that I forgot to buy that soap that I left in the cart at soap.com. Shameless plug. But there are other times when I wouldn't. So Google me Alexis or email me Alexis at Reddit, and I will read about this, and then I'll answer you.
Alexis, that was a great talk, and you kind of talked about driving energy via startup energy and internet energy. A lot of the folks in this room have companies that are well established, a management culture. Do you have any thoughts on how to infuse that internet energy and that startup energy into companies with a management culture?
Yes, and this is always easier said than done, so disclaimer. This is going to be really easy to say, a lot harder to do. The thing that is most championed in our industry is this ability to fail. To not do it after you've spent billions of dollars or millions of dollars, but because so much of what we do is lower cost, especially when you're writing code, it's a lot easier. But even if you look at some of the innovations that have happened in the world of hardware, where you're seeing things like even Kickstarter now has kind of been hacked to raise $10 million to build a Pebble watch. That's potentially a huge step in the way hardware gets manufactured, in this model of, let's not just say if we build it, they will come, but instead, like, will you come if we build it? Like, will you be willing to put money where your mouth is and pre-order this innovative new thing? If it were possible to a large company to try to recreate that in smaller clusters, where they can actually have smaller teams, being able to go out and test the market for ideas before investing tons of money more. I think Local Motors is probably the best example for this because, frankly, until I had learned about them, I would have not thought that was possible, right? But they've been able to do it at a scale that produces, like, automobiles, which is a very significant investment. So it would take some section of the company that has some amount of autonomy, some amount of budget, that also has the authority to communicate directly with supporters, directly with the customer, in a way that we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing relationships now between individuals and brands like never before. Like, it's totally reasonable to tweet at a brand. Like, the first time I tried dipping, this is important, my French fry in a Frosty, I'd never done this before until the bus tour. I made sure to let @Wendy know about that, and sure enough, she responded. Like, there is a relationship, and if you haven't done it, it is incredible. Seriously, French fry, Frosty, it's got a sweet, savory, it's incredible. That is becoming expected now. And the more human, or the better a connection you can make between consumer and manufacturer, I think the better off everything's going to be, because we're in radical new territory. We're seeing stuff that has, I mean, raising $10 million in pre-orders for a wristwatch made by 7 random Canadians, like, that's unheard of. But they did it, and it's just the start. And imagine if you could come into that same discussion, but with the legacy of a brand that people already trust and already know and already have a relationship with, you could do awesome stuff. Oh, and if any of you monetize that idea, please let me know so I can invoice you. And no.
Alexis, thank you. This has been terrific. You know, that was the most creative use of the F word in a CEA presentation ever. Thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you.